Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggett, founder of Car Dealer Magazine, and today on the show I'm delighted to be chatting to Tony Denton, who's the owner and managing director of Batchelors Motor Group, and Nathan Tomlinson, owner and dealer principal of Devonshire Motors. Good afternoon, James.
Hey, James.
Good afternoon, James.
Nice to see you both. Thank you very much for joining me. Right, quick introduction for you both. Tony has been at the helm of Batchelors Motor Group since 2013 after a management buyout, having originally joined as sales manager in 2011. The group was established in 1989 and has two dealerships in North Yorkshire, one in Ripon and another in York. Their franchises for Suzuki and Mitsubishi. Nathan's also a Mitsubishi dealer. He's been at Devonshire Motors for over 15 years, originally joining as after-sales director before taking the reins of the business in 2011. Devonshire Motors itself has been in operation since 1976 in Barnstaple in Devon. Turnover for 2019 for the two was 13 million for Devonshire and 25 million for Batchelors. Gents, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate your time today. Tony, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about Batchelors.
Okay, well, Batchelors, as you said, was formed in '89, originally as a Vauxhall franchise back in the day. Went through quite a big growth, in fairness, with David Batchelor, who was the former MD, with 8 franchises across 2 locations. I became involved in 2011 and then formed a management buyout in 2013, and then ratified the franchises that we had and also the locations that we had, and effectively picked two franchise partners that I felt that we could be a player with, being Suzuki and Mitsubishi. And then in 2018 we added on our second location, which is the Batchelors of York business in the city of York. So that's a quick intro to Batchelors. Turnover is pretty much split about between the two. Prior to COVID, we were on target to probably do 1,500 used cars this year across the group, and probably circa 700 or 800 new cars. So that's where we were.
Yeah.
Where we are now.
How did you get into the motor trade?
I always wanted to be in motor trade. I don't know why really, but I always wanted to be in motor trade. When I left school, I trained as a technician. Did that for sort of 3 or 4 years, then moved into sales management, dealer principal, general manager, and then I had a little sabbatical from motor trade in my sort of late 30s, early 40s, when I was looking to change career, but then through a quirk of fate ended up joining Batchelors in 2011, and the rest is history, or so to speak.
Well, thank you for that. Nathan, I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us a little bit about Devonshire.
So we're 30 years a Mitsubishi dealer located in Barnstaple, North Devon. I like to refer to us as a small business, but we do pack quite a big punch in the industry. Typically around 6 to 10% market share. We return on sales of around 4 to 5%. So we're what would be considered pretty much a typical local hero style business. Having said that, I feel that was kind of taken away from us at the end of March. So my interest going forward really is to understand how our business model will change in the future as a result of COVID-19.
So how did the crisis affect you? What went through your mind when it all started to kick off?
Well, I mean, initially very, very surreal. We went through the period of kind of anticipation, expecting the worst, planning for the worst, and then finding out that the worst was upon us. Actually closing the business down wasn't as difficult as it seemed in terms of the basics, but what became apparent was behind the scenes, the details, service reminders, marketing initiatives, things that we'd planned that were already running in the background. So many things that we didn't, anticipate initially that we needed to deal with after we'd closed. Looking back now, it was just a time of absolute chaos, really. But surprisingly, the team adapted really well to it. I mean, one of the benefits of being small is that we're nimble and we can change quickly to adapt to circumstances. So, you know, here we are, we've got through it. Actually, March in itself, we managed to deliver most of the new cars that we had going out. We've accepted a situation in April being what it is. And then, you know, for us now, May is all about understanding what the new normal is and then building from there to move forward.
Were you in a position going into this to weather this storm?
Financially, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we'd had a good Q1 as well. I think we finished with something in the region of 16 to 17% market share with Mitsubishi. It'd been a really good quarter. And because we were focused on deliveries in the early parts of March, you know, our Q1 more or less fell into place. And as I say, you know, weathering a month in April is not a problem either. The really interesting thing for me is to understand, you know, what we look like on the other side, you know, as a business. And not just for us, but for the rest of the industry.
We'll come on to how we're going to get back to work and when we think that's going to happen in a moment. Tony, can I ask you the same question then about your business? What went through your head when this crisis kicked off, and just how tough was it shutting down those two dealerships?
Yeah, I probably the stark reality had started to hit home for me about 4 weeks before closure. So we'd started to sort of put more posters up in the business, more sanitising stations, more hand washing. We were having our own regular Cobra meeting every Monday morning, I and the senior management team, just to work out how we were going to play this. We'd actually made the decision as a business to close on the Friday, so we actually closed on the Tuesday. But we'd already decided that that was the best course of action to take because our service customers were stopping coming. You could see that car sales was becoming about 30% of the usual norm. And for me, having the furlough scheme announced was a massive game changer. It enabled small private dealer groups like ourselves to have a look at what our close costs might look like. It was a terrifying situation, I have to be honest, because we'd just gone through a fairly rapid growth. We'd only just added the York business onto the group. So that carried some losses with it from last year, being in its first year. So for me, it was about which is the lesser of the two evils. You know, do we stay open and try and Trojan on through this, or do we just bite the bullet, do the socially responsible thing, and close, which is what we decided to do, other than providing a service to key workers should they need us.
How many staff have you got on the furlough scheme?
We've got, or we had, 49 staff out of 50 on the furlough scheme. The only
just yourself looking after the place.
Just myself, Trojaning on, trying to do everything that we could do. It was fairly obvious. Well, the first 2 weeks after closure, I've never been so busy in my life. You know, I mean, yes, I was locked down at home and not going to work, but the phone never stopped ringing, emails, live chats, web chats. That sort of subsided over the following couple of weeks. And then obviously our thoughts then turned to reopening and how we do that and what that might look like. And obviously preparing from a financial aspect as well, to make sure that we were ready for the bounce back.
So have you brought back members of staff now from the scheme?
Yeah, we have. On Friday, the 1st of May, we opened a small service operation at both Ripon and York with 2 technicians, service manager and associated sort of collection delivery valet drivers. We've also as well unfurloughed 2 sales managers now, because we are mindful that we need to make sure that our online side of the business, our new website, is functioning and that we're dealing with inquiries properly. So the decision was taken to, let's get back to this in bite-sized chunks. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel overnight and bring everybody back in one go, because it's not possible. But being in a situation to sort of gently ease our way back into trading and learn from that, I think, as we go on. Really.
It's certainly going to be very different businesses going forward across the motor industry, I think. I mean, Nathan, when it comes to that furlough scheme, what would you like to see from the government when it comes to the ending of that? I mean, if there was a lot of talk in the papers the weekend, and we covered last week about a cliff edge ending to it, causing absolute chaos. I mean, is that your opinion, and how would you like to see it ended?
Yeah, I think we need to be sensible because, you know, just listening to Tony there, one of the things that we've done differently is that we've actually, at 55 employees, we've had 19 active, you know, throughout. And that's given us a really good insight into how consumers have responded, both in sales and after sales, during the crisis. And one of the key things that's always been a barometer for us has been consumer response. So we've been able to, you know, operate our after sales business. We've been able to provide services to keep vehicles safe and roadworthy. But the interesting thing is not many people have wanted to take advantage of those services, frontline or otherwise. And the same for sales. You know, we've been nurturing sales inquiries, we've been dealing with sales inquiries, but the volume's dropped substantially. And I think the interesting thing coming off furlough will be how quickly consumers respond to the business, more so than businesses respond to the furlough scheme. So I think there needs to be a very, very sensible and balanced approach there.
Have you managed to sell any cars during this time?
We have, yeah. We've sold half a dozen vehicles to a mix of people that have needed them for various reasons. Key workers, yes, but also people that are still required to be on the road because they're not able to work from home, and because the work that they do is essential to supply chain or similar. So there's been business out there where we've provided vehicles. It's been more of a necessity, obviously, than a high ticket vanity purchase, but there has been business out there.
And how have you transacted those? Has that been online or just remotely by the phone?
Yeah, no, always online. You know, for us, online is quite different. It's not an anonymous process. You know, typically online will mean contacting us through the website, and we'll respond in a very bespoke and personal way. But yeah, absolutely, of course, no showroom contact.
And I know that Mitsubishi has launched a new service for dealers. Have you managed to take advantage of that for the online sales and delivery?
Not at the moment. It's very early days with that particular offer, and the new car inquiry level has been almost non-existent. It's almost all exclusively used vehicles at the moment.
Tony, you obviously both represent Mitsubishi. How's Mitsubishi been when it's come to looking after you guys during this crisis?
Yeah, really good. The level of support that we get from both our franchises, both from Suzuki and Mitsubishi, has been really good and really excellent. I think the nice thing about those franchises is they are somebody coming in there. They are, you know, very very much used to dealing with owner drivers and what we need. So it's been very very easy to contact all of the senior managers, all of the directors. Probably sick of hearing from me now. So yeah, I can't grumble. Everybody reacted very very quickly to the closure, even at the point when we were only thinking about closing. You know, having somebody there as a sounding board with regards to what we were thinking about, because my priority was always to keep staff safe and staff and customers, and likewise that was shared by our two brands as well.
Have you managed to sell any cars during this, and if so, how?
Okay, so we were obviously closed. We were furloughed. Our sites were closed. We didn't have any processes in place to enable test drives, collection, delivery, viewings. So that was something that we had to really consider of how that might work. We launched a new website whilst we were closed, created by the whole caboodle in Harrogate, our web provider we've worked really, really closely with over the last few years. In fact, they did our previous website as well. And our new online website went live the beginning of last week. We unfurloughed on Friday, and we sold 11 cars in one day, which was absolutely mind-blowing. Now, yes, there was some pent-up demand. Yes, there were some customers that were being nurtured through the closure period, but I would say that certainly 50% of the sales that we made on Friday were genuine, out-and-out online inquiries, and people who loved our process. I mean, we obviously hit the process fairly hard as well through social media, explaining that it was there, because for me the customers are falling into two categories. You know, they're falling into the category that they'll do whatever they have to do come hell or high water to buy a car, and there are the other group of customers who are probably like staff as well. In fairness, they need that level of comfort and to understand that they'll be safe while they're transacting with us. So that's really us. I've got to say, I don't think that will continue. I'd love it to do, but I don't think it will. Yeah, certainly the signs of the trade moving to an online process are certainly very, very good, I would have said.
Yeah, it's an incredible achievement to make that sort of level of sales on the first day. Were they new or used cars?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were all used cars.
They're all used cars. Okay. So, do you think your business will change into a more online model in the future, or I mean, there seems to be some hesitation there.
I'm probably 80% certain that our business will turn, or that indeed that motor trade will turn to a more online culture in the future. And I would have said that this terrible situation, this terrible disease that we find ourselves amongst has kind of been the kickstart that online needed, really. It's got some massive ramifications for trade, you know, certainly more than we could probably discuss within the next 10 or 20 minutes or whatever. Yeah, it's something that we've embraced, and we embraced it a long time ago as well. You know, we embraced it probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we've been happy to sell the odd car online, and then you get a situation like Friday, which is just ridiculous, really.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see how things change. Nathan, talking about the future, firstly, let's have a chat about when you think you might be back at work. I mean, we covered on Friday and over the weekend the reports of the meeting between the government and some industry leaders that were discussing possibly May the 11th as a return to doing business. We also picked up on the weekend that Ireland are allowing dealers to go back on May the 18th. When do you think you're going to be back at work properly?
Depends how you define properly. I think we're a week or two away from a more sustainable back at work. But as I say, we've been operating on a reduced staffing basis throughout, and I'm just interested to see how that's actually developing. I think the next 2 weeks will introduce different working practices for dealerships, and perhaps a return to some showroom-based activity, albeit socially distanced. Beyond that, I think, you know, again, the interesting thing for me is what do we look like as a dealership? What does the business model look like as we come out of this? I agree with Tony. I think, you know, it's certainly introduced people to a digital experience, people that wouldn't have considered it at any other time. You know, take us, for example, as a small business. You would typically see the same sales executive that you've seen 3 or 5 times before when you bought a car, and that's a lovely experience, and that customer isn't looking for anything different. But to find that sales executive is now available at 9 o'clock at night on a telephone call, and will bring the vehicle out to your home at a time that you choose, and then deliver the vehicle to your home, that changes that customer from being a showroom-based customer into a digital customer. So, as I say, my interest for this is really what happens next.
That's an even more personal service, isn't it, going forward? I'm sure that the customers are probably going to react to that very positively.
Well, why wouldn't you?
What about when it looks like opening your showroom? What are you planning in terms of PPE and measures that you think you're going to have to put in place to make that happen?
Well, we've got the usual, the typical dealership measures in place at the moment. So the sneeze screens, we've got one-way access in and out the showroom. All our appointments are time set and it's one at a time. So we've got the doors controlling the flow of people through the business. So we can literally manage time slots very effectively. In terms of PPE, if you look at the government website, there really isn't a great deal of guidance or information beyond the basics, and there hasn't been for throughout this. I think the interesting thing that we'll be looking for is when there's a return to work announced, will it be with a different level of PPE to the advice we've had so far? So will face masks be mandatory? Will we have to take other precautions aside from the ones that we've got already in place?
Tony, it's certainly probably going to see a rush of dealers heading to suppliers to pick up this sort of PPE, and at the moment, no dealer really knows what they need to buy. I mean, are you finding that difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of PPE, I think for me it probably falls into two different categories. It's one, yes, it's the personal protection equipment that staff require, and perhaps some of that product that we need to give to customers, but also as well the PPE in relation to how do we dress the site. What changes do we need to make to entrances, desks, staff? What is the showroom going to look like? What is service reception going to look like? I don't think it's a case of just rushing out and buying a load of face masks and blue gloves.
I mean, it's a very difficult situation, isn't it? Because there's talk that a guidance document was circulated with some dealers groups last night for them to feed back to the government on whether that draft document is fit for purpose. But you guys need to see that sooner rather than later, because it's going to take you some time to prepare, isn't it, to open a showroom? I mean, how long, if they came out with a document that said you needed these sorts of PPE and these sorts of procedures in place, how long would it take you to put that in place to allow you to reopen?
I think that providing that equipment is available, we could probably do that relatively quickly. One of the beauties about being a small company is you can change things very quickly without having to go through a multitude of different layers of management to decide what to do. My concern is whether that equipment is going to be readily available, and what our delivery time is going to look like for this type of product. Also, as well, is my personal view is that there are some touch points.
Sorry, I think we might have lost you a little bit there, Tony. Nathan, if you're still there, well, can we touch on test drives and what your thoughts are when it comes to the sanitisation point and the PPE needed for that? I mean, are you going to let customers out in a brand new showroom to unaccompanied?
The interesting thing, I think, with test drives is that over perhaps the last 5 years, there's been quite a significant decline in the number of customers. I mean, if you look back at even when I started in 2011, we always measured test drive ratios and always used a benchmark. And that's just changed dramatically with things like the ability to research online, YouTube with test drive and product videos. So I don't think it's necessarily as big a problem as it seems. Unaccompanied test drives, as long as you've got insurance that covers that circumstance and you can prepare for that, and sanitizing a vehicle before and after, not really a challenge as far as I'm concerned.
So do you think those test drives are going to be vital as we go forward, especially when people are moving on to online sales? Are customers still going to want to drive the car, or will that test drive start slipping away to be something that we used to do in the past?
I think it's really interesting. With a new car, as I say, it's becoming less and less important as consumers understand a kind of accepted level of quality across the board. And many of our customers are buying the same or similar products again. but it doesn't disappear with used cars because it's always such a specific purchase. So I think it'll be two separate problems to deal with. You know, for dealers to address that on the used car side is going to be very much more important, I think, than it is on the new car side.
And how are you planning for your business to change, Nathan? I mean, I'm certainly looking at my business, and it's going to be very different going forward. These sorts of crises make you think differently about what you have to do and what you do in the future. What are you thinking about changing, and how are you preparing for that?
Well, the way I'm planning for it is literally to change my mind about every 10 minutes at the moment. I don't know. I really don't. I think that the thing we need to understand in the short term is, if you look at after sales, for example, if you need to see 50 customers a day for a given level of revenue, we're probably still going to be able to see those 50 customers a day, but how far differently are they going to be spaced? You know, how are we going to manage those arrivals and departures? You know, as an after sales focused business, our biggest challenge tomorrow is to return to the overhead absorption position we were in February. So, you know, for me, it's really interesting to understand and see how we're going to manage the same workflow through the workshop. I literally don't think car sales will be as big a challenge as after sales is for most dealers.
And when you've been managing staff on the furlough scheme, I know you haven't got quite as many as some other dealers. I mean, have you managed to stay in contact with them? Has it been difficult to stay in touch with those guys?
As a small business, it's been very difficult because, you know, we switched to a position where we've had to work, you know, on the business much more than in the business. Of course, we've another layer of management, and they've been keeping very close to staff. And as directors of the business, we've been in touch with staff as frequently as we're able. But that's very, very different to when you're working in the business on a day-to-day basis, when you're involved with every decision, with every member of staff. And one of my concerns, again, throughout this has been how we've shifted from a very one-to-one contact, very personal business into quite a distanced setup whilst we've been managing the situation.
Unfortunately, we've lost Tony while we've been chatting, so hopefully we're going to try and get him back. But if you don't mind, Nathan, I'll stick with you and ask you a few more questions. When it comes to boosting sales in the market, there's been talk again this morning of a Scrappy scheme in Germany. There was lots of rumours of it being discussed here last week. What are your thoughts on the Scrappy scheme? Would it work for you, and do you think it's needed?
I think it's probably too soon. I mean, certainly we need to do something. I think for me, the interesting thing in the short term is around the consumer confidence. I don't think the offer is what's going to drive inquiries into a dealership in the short term. It's going to be the confidence factor, which is why we've gone with a safety-based marketing message and approach. And I think that would be key for dealers and also manufacturers to do the same in the short term.
I suppose a cut in VAT would also have a very similar impact. I mean, if they chopped it down to 15%, like they did in the last recession, I mean, that's a 5% instant saving on the price of most cars, isn't it? I mean, do you think that'd be enough to get people back into showrooms?
It's difficult to say. It really is difficult to say. You know, as I've just said, for me, it's going to be more the confidence, I think, initially than it is the price. I think, you know, looking at there've been several polls recently on consumer confidence, and the key thing has always been that whether or not we've got social distancing in place and whatever happens next, you know, up to 60% of people surveyed are not willing to leave the house for the next month or two. And that's, you know, that's the news feed, that's the effect of, you know, the way people are feeling at the moment. It's not a price issue. It's not an economical consideration. It's their own personal safety.
Yeah, I mean, I read in the paper yesterday that the government is planning a campaign to get people back to work and out of the homes, because they have become very comfortable under lockdown and actually rather scared about leaving. And I think that's going to be very difficult, and it's going to be the most important thing that we need as a motor trade to get people back into business, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, we've undergone a culture change, haven't we?
Yeah.
It's not just the motor trade. It's across the board. Everybody's adapted now to a situation where they're protecting themselves. They're locked down effectively. They look at things differently. So to break that culture now will be very, very difficult.
What do you think to the government's response overall to this crisis? And have you taken advantage of any of the other schemes outside of the furlough?
I think it's difficult. Well, it's easy to criticise unless you walk in another person's shoes. It's very, very easy to criticise decisions that have been made and effects that have happened as a result of. I think the government they've done a great job of managing a very, very difficult situation. I think the real test now will be how quickly they are able to reverse the situation and to bring the economy back online. I think that'll be where they'll be judged.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that'll happen sooner rather than later. I mean, I think the procedures and help they put in place and the speed at which they did it has certainly helped a lot of businesses. It certainly helped mine. What about new cars and new car supply? Have you heard anything from Mitsubishi about how that's going to be affected?
New car supply is good. So I mean, you can see that two ways. I mean, the dock, there are plenty of cars at the docks, so supply isn't an issue. So we'll be able to move quickly to sell and deliver cars when the demand returns. Maybe there's a slight concern there about how we're going to deal with that stock together, as time goes by, depending on how quickly consumer confidence returns. But in the short term, it's better to have vehicles available than not.
And what about your thoughts on used car pricing? And we covered at the weekend some research that had shown that they'd dropped marginally in a couple of regions, but actually in London and Scotland had gone up. What are your thoughts on used car prices, and what are you seeing?
Well, we've seen commentary from CAP, and I think the way that the industry and customers are responding in general to used cars, I think values are holding up really well, and I don't see that there's any need for us to panic about changing anything in the short term.
How long do you think it will be before you bounce back from this?
That's a good question, James. In all honesty, I don't think we'll bounce back from this in terms of returning to how we were before. I think it's a change for the industry. It's a change for the dealer business model. I think 3 months we'll be back into a position of new normal, but I don't think that new normal will reflect what the industry used to be prior to the end of March. I just don't see it returning the same.
No, I think there's going to be some huge shifts across all industries. I mean, my business will never, ever look the same as it did in March. And I think that's the same in many other industries too, which is, it's a worry, but there will be new opportunities. It's about seeking those out, I think. So I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions before. I don't think we're going to get Tony back, Nathan. So I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions before we go. Two of which I've asked everybody that I've interviewed. The firstly, what do you think the positives are to look forward to from this as an industry?
Well, we like a challenge, don't we? So one of the positives is that we've got fresh challenges to deal with. I mean, as an industry, as a business, perhaps we've been a little bit stale now. We've been doing the same thing for a long time. Tony started to talk about the difference with digital, which is long overdue, and I think this has been a catalyst to change the way many dealers work, to embrace flexibility, to provide services that are more tailored to customers' requirements rather than the business's own structure. So I think that's a strong positive.
Sorry.
And the other thing I was going to say off the back of that is it will, I think, help more dealers to focus on the after-sales side of their business, which is so important and often neglected.
And what's the single most important thing you've learned off the back of this crisis?
To be flexible and never to think what's coming next. And
finally, would you like to give a message to your staff who might be watching?
Yeah, I miss our staff so much. You know, we were such a close business, and you know, it's been really difficult to be away from everybody for such a long time.
Hopefully you're back to business properly very soon, Nathan. Nathan, thanks ever so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Sorry that we couldn't get Tony back. This week on the show, I've got a whole host of guests. It's obviously a shorter week because of the bank holiday on Friday, but tomorrow it's Romans International's Tom Giaconelli talking about how the supercar market's been affected. On Wednesday, I'm chatting to the star of Wheeler Dealers, Mike Brewer, and on Thursday, it's Langley Prestige's Simon Webb. If you want to get involved in Car Dealer Live like this one, you can email me. It's james@blackbullmedia.co.uk. I'm at Car Dealer Ed on Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you're looking for something to do over the next few days, download the last issue of Car Dealer magazine. It's a digital copy, completely free of charge. You can find the links to it on our website. And if you want to be kept up to date with some breaking news on your phone, you can join the Car Dealer Magazine WhatsApp group. Just send me a message via one of those methods I've already mentioned, and I'll send you a link to join. There's a full schedule for Car Dealer Live on our website, where you can check back every weekday at midday at cardealermagazine.co.uk for the latest one. Thanks again to Nathan. Sorry we couldn't get Tony back, but we'll give him a call afterwards, make sure he's all right. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, James.